Living a life in full is a conversation you always wanted to have with that person who gave an amazing TED Talk, or the author of one of your favorite books, or that inspirational Olympian you always wanted to know more about. It's graduate-level conversations with those making a difference in the world and in the lives of others. This show brings you new ideas and approaches so that you can live a life in full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm Dr. Chris Stout, your host, and today's episode is brought to you by the ATI Foundation. ATI Physical Therapy's philanthropic efforts extend their commitment to quality care outside clinic walls by giving back to communities. They touch the lives of thousands of people each year through their ATI Foundation. The ATI Foundation is an independent 501c3 charitable organization that gives help and hope to children with physical impairments. Since 2003, the foundation has raised over $4 million to assist children with physical impairments in our communities. Often, the beneficiary families have mounting debt and are overcome by financial and physical obstacles. Through the work of the clinical and corporate team members, they raise funds to purchase medical equipment, pay medical bills, remodel families' homes to accommodate their child's special needs. But more importantly, they give families hope by offering a better quality of life for their child. To learn more about the foundation and ATI, please visit atipt.com. Welcome to today's episode. Today we're very fortunate to have Ian Lantz on. He's, I think, foremost an amazing artist, but he's also a community builder, almost by accident. It reminds me of some of the things I've talked about being an accidental humanitarian. These are things that he didn't necessarily plan, but he just really sort of had this passion and the skill set and the moxie to be able to create the Pullman Cafe. He's also the co-owner of the Latin Rhythm Lounge, and just really by his own education, a renowned artist. He's had multiple showings across the United States. He's done public art, he's done commission pieces, and he's just really a wonderful human being, and just really sort of sets the standard for looking at art and community engagement as a way to bring down barriers, start communication and conversation, and really make a wonderful difference in the world. And Ian certainly is a great exemplar of living a life in full. So without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Stout, and welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm really excited today to have a good friend and amazingly accomplished artist, as well as a community activist, Ian Lantz. Ian, welcome to the show.
Dr. Chris Stout, thank you for having me, and happy Friday.
Thanks, likewise, brother. So, in terms of background and things like that, you are not native to Chicago. You hail from LA, is that right?
Yes, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I've lived in different parts of Southern California, from Orange County to Rancho Cucamonga, Mission Viejo. But before moving to Chicago, I was in Sherman Oaks for about 6 years. And then before that, I was in Los Feliz. But my first apartment was on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty fun. So that sounds like then went through high school out there? And
I did. I had a challenging upbringing. My biological mom passed away when I was 5, so my father was never really around. So that my aunts and my mom, who I call mom, who earned the title mom, which is my dad's mother, my grandmother, she raised me, but she was new to the country, so it was challenging for her to make ends meet. So we lived in a little apartment in Glendale, and from there, my aunts would kind of share responsibilities. So every year I was going to like a new school.
Oh, wow.
A new city, a new school, always had to prove myself. Started off going in a private school, then public schools, and it was it seemed like every 6-8 months I was in a new school, new environment. So, and some of the areas were not the best areas. So when you go into these not the best cities, you have the challenges of being the new kid, and being the new kid, you have to prove yourself all the time. And it's like a hurdle after hurdle.
Yeah, gosh, bless your heart, man. So then college out there too? Or?
I went for college for a little bit, but I knew that I just had to work and help my mother out. So I was doing construction, bartending, waitering, picking up any kind of job just to make it 40, 50 hours a week. While I was doing construction, I wanted to go to school, but I knew that I didn't really have an option. I just had to work and help out. So I started going to Barnes & Noble and just picking up books, self-help books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, How to Be a Millionaire, and just really just self-taught myself certain things. I went to Toastmasters and learned how to really articulate myself on how to speak, and then really gain the confidence of doing public speaking. And then I started winning some local speaking awards.
Wow.
And then I saw maybe a break into Hollywood. I had some friends that were casting directors, so they would put me in TV shows as an extra. And it was much easier than
doing construction
or waiting
Yeah.
tables. And before you know it, I was like 19 and I joined the union. It was the Screen Actors Guild, and there was another one called the American Federation of Radio Television Artists, so it was SAG-AFTRA. So I started doing that, and then when I was slow, I would bartend, waiter, anything. And my friend would also bring me on for side jobs for construction. So I always just kept working and working and working just to make things happen.
That's great. Well, I know you have an amazing work ethic, but I didn't really know the details of that backstory. So tough times, but making things, not being a stranger to hard work, making things work for you, and then you came to Chicago. What caused that?
I did. So I was after like in my late 20s, 30s, I knew that I had to find a career. So I was selling cars. I started Volkswagen, and then I got into Beverly Hills Porsche Audi. I was doing very well for myself, but I always had to work weekends. I had to work the major holidays, and it was really a grind. And I'd always tell my aunt, you know what you can get me for Christmas or my birthday is a new job. And so in 2010, I got a phone call from my aunt, and she said, I have an opportunity for you. It's going to be in IT. You're going to work for a law firm, and I'm going to set up an interview. And I basically said, I really don't even know how to turn on a computer. And she said, well, you're not going to say that in the interview.
Good advice.
Right. So that was the beginning. And right before that, I had my first show in Hollywood. And, my friends and my girlfriend at the time said, are you really going to leave L.A.? You just had a fantastic show in Hollywood, and you had a large crowd.
Wow. A show doing... What was the show?
Oh, it was an art show. So in 2010 is when I really started painting. I was always drawing as a kid, and one of my buddies went to USC. The other one was at UCLA. They were at my place in Sherman Oaks, and they were about to graduate. One was going to be like a nuclear physicist, and these crazy smart degrees, chemical engineers, something. I said, okay. And they recently got tattoos, and I showed them my art book, and they both said, Ian, if you can put this on canvas, you probably can quit your day job.
Wow.
And so that kind of stuck in my head.
So it was art really, we'll circle back to art and go in a deep dive, but art really wasn't on your trajectory. It was just a hobby of expression. Wow. How fortuitous for them to see your work there too. I mean, that's really, kind of now, again, no spoilers, but that's really become a big part of who you are. So
I would always draw as a kid. I would get in trouble because I would just sit at the table, and before you know it, I would doodle on things, and they would say, stop doodling on everything. But it was just my outlet of drawing things.
Sure.
So back to the Sherman Oaks part, I ended up going to Aaron Brothers, and it's like a Hobby Lobby or a Michael's equivalent in the West Coast. And I went in, and my girlfriend said, what are we doing here? And I said, well, I'm going to buy a paintbrush, an easel, some brushes, and canvases, and paints. And she looked at me and said, do you even know how to paint? And I said, no, but I think today would be a good day to learn.
That's great. Wow.
And so I bought a pack of 5 canvases. I created 5, and I ran into a buddy of mine at the gym. And everybody's an actor somehow in the field of Hollywood. And my buddy was recently on LA Ink. It was a popular TV show a while ago with tattoo artists. And he was one of the guest actors on there. And he said, oh, did you see my, my new art on my shoulder at the gym? And I said, oh, it's really nice. And I happened to took a few photos of my paintings, and I showed it to him. And he said, wow, I know this this gallery owner in Hollywood. She would really like your stuff. Just text me those pictures. And sure enough, a week later, I get a call from this girl. She left me a voicemail saying, I was referred to you by Justin, and I really like the paintings. Can you come to our gallery and show me these in person? So I went there and I brought them, and a couple of them they liked, a couple of them they said no, and they said, did you shellac it, and can you frame it? And I looked at her just confused. I said, what do you mean by that? She said, did you put a protective mat on it yet? And I said, no. And she's like, well, after you're done painting, you should put a protective mat. They have a gloss, a finish. And I said, okay. And then she said, you would need to frame it if you're going to show here, but we'd like to have you show here. And so that was my first show. It packed, and that started leading to other things, but then that's when I got the call, got the interview to go to Sidley Austin.
You must have felt so ambivalent about that. I mean, is this the Christmas present I've been waiting for? I've got this new potential job gig, but gosh, the timing. I'm in a gallery. I've got a showing. It's full. So but you went to check out the opportunity anyway, huh?
I did. It was a tough one because at the time I was in a nice apartment. I was very comfortable, and I knew the only really thing I knew about Chicago was the murder rate, alcohol, pizza, Al Capone, and people, and cold, very cold. That's the only thing I really knew about Chicago. I really wasn't on the radar for me. It's just big cities.
Yeah, sure.
I shined it. I would always go either to Mexico or Hawaii to get away from LA because I thought LA was a big city. So I took the chance. I got the job over the phone interview. My aunt was living in the north side of the city in Rogers Park. She said you could stay with me until you get settled in. So I kept my apartment in LA, and I'd fly back every month. And I'll be honest, when I came to Chicago, I hated it. I got here February 11, 2011. Chicago just had the worst blizzard in 50 years. I was supposed to start work, but they delayed it because people were stranded on Lakeshore.
Oh, gosh.
And they had to get snowmobiles for people that were stranded.
I remember. Oh, yeah.
So I said,
welcome to Chicago.
Welcome to Chicago. This is my new home. Yeah, this is exactly where I want to be.
Wow.
And that was my experience to Chicago.
Gosh. So I remember from an earlier conversation when you and I were just getting to know each other some while back, you had been given advice of don't go to the south side of Chicago. You got to stay in the Loop, you got to stay in the north side, but for heaven's sake, don't go down there. And that seemed to be advice that you took for a certain period of time, but there must have been some kind of gravitational pull that kind of, led you to have some curiosity about it or whatever. And I want to talk about that because I'm so impressed with the work that you've been able to do by virtue of community development. I think that urban development, urban decay, great cities and things like that, but a lot of times there's this aspect of, developers coming in and gentrification and people being, displaced, and it really becomes a different kind, in my opinion, totally my opinion, a ruinous kind of thing in a different direction. But you had some pull, and then you've been able to just do some amazing things. So first tell us about the pull, and then we'll do a deeper dive into what all you've been involved with.
As far as like the don't go south and don't go west, yes. I was going to, everybody would tell me, where do you live? And I said, Rogers Park. And I said, well, that area is pretty sketchy. They base, everybody would always tell me these are like the 5 neighborhoods you'd want to live in if you live in Chicago. And it always came up like the same 5. It was like Gold Coast, River North, Bucktown, Wicker Park, Lincoln Park, Lakeview, and some surrounding. But it was always the 5 neighborhoods. And I said, there's got to be more to that. And I started going to this bar in Rogers Park called Carrie's. And I was scared when I went in. It was December, and I had no friends. The only person I knew was my aunt, and she doesn't drink. And I was used to being around lots of people. Mm-hmm. So I went in the bar, and it was called Carrie's. It was on Devon. I would walk 2 blocks. I sit right at the door because it's one of those little mom and pop shop bars. It's been there forever.
Yeah.
And the first thing I said, "Are you Carrie?" He said, "No, I'm Pete," because the sign said Carrie's Lounge.
Yeah, sure.
And so I gave him my ID, and he said, you came to this city at the wrong time of the year, California, because I had my California ID, and I started laughing. I said, I sure did. And so, long story short, ended up becoming friends with Pete, and I started going there on the weekends, and I would tell the bartenders, "Where's Pete?" And they said, "Well, Pete doesn't work here on the weekends." I go, "That's your best bartender." And they said, "Well, Pete's not a bartender." And I said, "Yeah, he is." He goes, "No, he's actually the owner." I said, "No, Carrie's the owner." And they go, "No, Carrie's Pete's dad." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I this whole time I made friends with the owner, and I never knew. He never said I'm the owner. He just said I'm Pete, and I would say I'm Ian. We had conversations, and I was really. It was still winter, so I would still create in the apartment. So I showed him my piece, and he said, "Wow, Ian, you did that. If you made a painting, I'd put it in my bar." So I just surprised him one day, and I said, "Here's a gift for you."
Oh.
And
so
he really
cool.
liked, because he had these voodoo masks, so I made it like voodoo themed, and so it went tiki voodoo kind of mask. So it went on the wall. People loved it. One of the bartenders was a bar manager for a nightclub, and it was in the South Loop. But this whole time people were saying, "Don't go south, don't go west," and that was like the same pattern, And I was talking to Pete one day, and I said, "Pete, where can I go besides the Loop?" And he said, "Ian, you have to go to all the neighborhoods. Chicago is a city of neighborhoods." He said, "Just don't be an idiot. Don't go to the parks at 2 a.m. He said, "As long as you're not into drugs or gangs or any of that, you'll be fine. And just be aware." And so I took that to heart, and I ventured off into Wicker and Logan and these other neighborhoods, and before I know it, Pilsen. And that was it. And I always wanted to go to the south side, because I'd always hear all this negativity, and people would say, "You don't want to go down there." And I said, "One day I'll just take the Dan Ryan all the way to the red line till it ends." And they said, "No, Ian, you can't do that. You can't do that." And I said, "Okay, I'll drive down there." So I started exploring like the Pilsen area by Sox Stadium, and I met this developer that was buy property to put veterans in, and we ended up in Inglewood. And we were on Emerald Street, like 71st. The whole block was pretty much vacant, but there was 10 guys over here, 10 guys over here, 15 guys over here, and he went to go check out the building, and sure enough, 10 guys are walking towards me. Or before they walked, he said, "You're not scared, are you?" And I said, I don't know what to be scared of. If we're in LA, we're dead. Yeah. So there's nothing to be scared at this point. We're done. And so sure enough, these 10 guys walked to me. The only thing I can think of was like, "How you guys doing?" And I looked them all in the eye, and they said, "How are you?" And they that was it. And that's what I've come to realize. You can go into these neighborhoods, and if you just acknowledge people, a lot of times they're not going to bother you. It's the crime happens because it's usually an action to a reaction. So he knew a lady there that was started an organization called Imagine Inglewood If, and we started talking. He said, "This is an artist from Ian. He's an artist from L.A." And he said, "Come on, Ian, let's go inside with these kids." And I said, "I already know where this is going. I know what's going to happen. Somehow I'm going to get. I'm a sucker for like helping people, and I know what's going to happen." And sure enough, there's kids, and a lot of them kind of had the similarities of mom and dad's not being around. Brothers and sisters are either hooked on drugs or in jail or dead. And so I started just showing them how to draw, create, and I would tell them, say, if you don't go to school, at least you can teach yourself how to read and write.
Well, and art's such a nice, non-threatening medium, too. I mean, not everybody can sing a song or write a poem or shoot a basketball, but, everybody can take a crayon or a marker or whatever and a piece of paper or a sidewalk and express themselves and be creative. I think that's a wonderful tool. So did you became then a mentor with the...
I did. Imagine Inglewood If, I started going there, becoming a mentor, and people are saying, "Ian, you're really taking a chance with your life every time you go down there." And I said,
"You're just getting constant pushback of negativity of folks that aren't in those areas."
Right.
Wow.
And you'd hear it on the news, 10 people died in
Sure.
Inglewood this week.
That's the reality, sure.
And one of the kids, he was maybe like 12, I was trying to keep him positive, because a lot of them just have so much negativity built around them, and it's it would break my heart, literally. I would go there, and I was working in IT, and I started figuring out, what if I can get old computer parts and just bring it here, and they can kind of just play with it. And so that's what I started doing. There needed to be more than just art. So then I got companies to give old computers, and they would pick them up. And my art started taking off in Chicago. I started doing little shows, and my name was getting kind of known. And I invited them to a show. I said, I want to invite you. She passed away. Her name was Jean Carter Hill, and she's the one that started Imagining Inglewood up. I said, Jean, I want you to come to River North, and I want you to bring these kids to my art show. And she said, we'll come. Just tell us the date.
Oh, wonderful. Wow.
And so I brought, same thing. It was a success. It was on Chicago and in River North, and people came from attorneys to CEOs to regular people that just, 9-to-5ers, from people that work in anywhere. And the gallery owner came to me and she said, Ian, I think we have a problem. And I said, what's the problem? She said, well, I think there's people here, but I don't think they belong here.
Oh.
And then that really kind of just it made me upset, because it's a show, and I have a vast network. I just invite everybody. I don't care what your background is. It's more bringing people together to get to know each other. And then I pulled her aside and I said, how does this group look? She said, oh, no, I met that Stout. He's the founder of this company, and they're wonderful people. And I said, what about this group? She said, oh, they're great. I met, they're fantastic. And I said, what about the people over here? She said, oh, I met that lovely lady and those other people, wonderful people. And I said, what about those people? And she said, that's the one. I said, well, if I have a show, you have to accept everybody that comes to see me. Mm-hmm. And that was it. She got quiet. And so I saw Gene and the kids from Inglewood, and I gave them hugs. And sure enough, an African-American guy, about 6'2", looks like he played for the Cubs or one of these baseball teams or football team. He says, who's this Ian Lantz guy? And I go, here we go. Somebody else is upset with me because I brought people from Inglewood here. And he's very serious. And he said, you're the artist from LA, and you brought these kids from Inglewood to this art show. And I said, yes. He said, how does this happen? And I said, well, I went down there and I mentored these kids, and I give them computer parts and show them how to paint. And then he stuck his hand out. He said, that's what's up. My name is Marcus Nettles. I play for the San Diego Padres, or I used to play for the San Diego Padres. I grew up in Inglewood.
Whoa.
So from there, we had a connection, and he started coming to my shows. And one day he calls me and he says, I want you to come to my buddy's beer launch party. And I said, okay. And I was still doing IT for Sidley. And I was exhausted. I was doing 12, 14-hour days, and I go there right after work. And it was a bar in River North, and sure enough, there was like BMWs, Mercedes. I felt like I was back in Hollywood Strip again, just a lot of cars. And there's people taking photographs, and news people were there. And I walk in, and Marcus greets me, and he said, oh, this is so-and-so. He plays for the Cubs. This guy plays for the Sox. This guy plays for the Blackhawks. And I want you to meet Jared. This is Jared Payton, and then I forget his sister name, but the sister Payton, and they had a lot of their friends there because it was Jared's official beer launch party. So he launched his beer line with Argus Brewery, and it was called Payton Sweetness. So that's how I got to meet. That was my first introduction to Argus Brewery, and I left that party to go back to Rogers Park to my little bar, and I told the bartender the story, and he said, Ian, actually, those guys in the bar just left that same party, and they're drinking over here. I was like, what's the coincidence of that? From River North to like Rogers Park.
Yeah.
And so he tells him about me. He said, this is this guy, Ian Lantz. He's a fantastic artist. And so they bought me around. They asked me to come to the table, and they said, what's your name? And I said, Ian Lantz. And they said, great. Do you have a website? And I said, no. And they said, all right. So they started Googling me. And I said, well, if you try to Google me or do anything, you're not going to find me. And I don't have a website. And they're like, oh, you're one of those artists. And I said, yeah, I'm one of those artists. They said, well, Mr. Artist, where can we find your work then if you don't have a website? Or we can't find you on Google. And I said, well, if you look behind you, to the right of you, to the left of you, those are my pieces.
You could not have teed that up any better.
And then they looked back. They said, you did that? I said, yeah. And so we exchanged numbers, and they said, have you ever been down to Pullman? And I said, no, it is at a suburb. They said, no, it's the very tip of the south side. And I was thinking Inglewood again. I go, all right, well, I've been to Inglewood, and it was like the 50s and 60s. And they said, no, we're actually in the hundreds. And I said, okay. Got their number, and some people said, you can't go down there, Ian. I said, why not? It's the south side. and that's the hundreds, Ian. Like, that's the deep South Side. Like, nobody goes there. I'm like, what is it with everybody? Everybody's like, it's like this, like, you just get lost and you die.
Right,
Like, it's
go
like
into
this
the fog or
yeah.
something, yeah.
And so I've always been that person that you can't tell me I can't do something. So
Just watch me.
Yeah, so I went down there. They invited me to their house, and I'm driving into Pullman, and instantly I thought I was in a Hollywood, Paramount, Warner Brothers backlot. I said, "Wow, this is probably where they shoot all the shows in Chicago." And we had lunch, and they brought me to Argus Brewery. I had the best time, and then there was a gentleman by the name of Nick who also lived in Pullman. He's the brew historian. He started telling me the history while I was drinking beer. He said, this is the first industrial plant town built in America. And he goes on to George Pullman. It's the reason why we have Labor Day. Unions were created here. The Ness family had a bakery over here. It just,
Wow.
Pullman Porter, Philip Randolph, and they start dropping these names. And it was like a breath of fresh air because I was getting like a history lesson. I was drinking some really good craft beer. And then they take me on the drive into Pullman. They start showing me the area. And first thing I said, Jesus, how much are these houses? Like $1 million, $2 a piece? Because I still had the LA mentality. Mm-hmm. LA is just California in general is super expensive, and if you were to try to buy a historic house out there, it's a fortune. And so they told me the pricing was very affordable, and at the time I was starting to look for condos. I couldn't afford a house in Chicago. It's just ridiculous unless you wanted a big mortgage, and I didn't want a big mortgage, especially right after 2007 and 6 and seeing what a lot of people went through. So I started going back to Pullman, and something just kept drawing me back. There was like something telling me like, you should be here. And I was looking at places in Logan, Rogers Park, just for condos, and finally I got a realtor to give me listings, and I tried buying one house. It didn't work out, and then I tried buying another, put an offer in, and it was such a process. Finally, 6 months into it, they accepted my offer, and everybody said, Ian, there's a reason why it's inexpensive down there. It's the South Side. And I said, well, I'm taking my chance. So I bought a house there, and at the time there was maybe like 30 or 40 vacant houses, so there was a lot of for sale signs everywhere. So it wasn't, there was people there. They'd been there a long time, but at that time they were still recovering from the market crash and everything. So I bought a house there and started posting stuff, and I became friends with people on Facebook, and they realized I was an artist. They just thought I was a 9-to-5 corporate guy. And then first thing I said is, where do we get coffee around here? And they said, well, we got Cal Harbor and McDonald's. And I went to Cal Harbor, and it's a great breakfast spot, but it wasn't my idea of like a sit-down coffee shop. So I said, that's not going to work. I lived in LA my whole life. I lived in North Chicago.
Yeah, wait a minute.
Yeah, I was like,
I'm living here now.
Yeah, I was like, we have to change that. Like, this can't. So I tried buying a building. It didn't work out again. And the city calls me, and they said, hey, are you the? And from that time, I started doing art. I would just randomly put paintings up, and one family actually commissioned me to do their garage, and I said, well, all right, I'll do it, but you need to be involved, you and your husband. And they said, well, if we're paying you, why do we have to paint it? Sounds like a scam, Ian. And I said, no, I like you to be part of it.
Little Huck Finn there. It's so fun to paint this fence.
And so they joined in, and with the shaking of the cans, it turned into like a late night party on a Friday or Saturday, and a couple of neighbors came around. They said, what's going on? I said, yeah, you need to join in too, and we have some adult drinks.
It becomes performance art.
Yes, everybody
right?
does it, and I started finishing it off at 9. It was hard to see because we didn't have a lot of lighting, and I said, I hope I didn't mess up their garage. They're gonna be really upset because I just invited like 6 random people just to paint their garage. And the next day, she took a picture. She called me. She said, Ian, we love it. It's the best thing. And another neighbor said, I want that same exact thing. And I said, well, we're going to make it a party. And so it kind of took wind. And I said, more people need to know about this, but I can't get people down here just because everybody that I know that I work with is in downtown, and they have that same fear of it's
mentality.
Yeah. So I tapped into Argus Brewery. They have tours on Saturday, and I said, what if the people are already down here? What if Argus sponsored these parties, and since they're already drinking, what if we got people to leave the brewery? They can actually check out Pullman and be part of this painting process. And they thought it was a great idea. they would come in, and people that never tried Argus Brewery, that lived there, that didn't know about it, would taste Argus, and people that have never been to the South Side, they're only going to the Argus tour, they got to explore Pullman. And so we kept doing this, and I'd take photos, and people would take photos, and we'd post them on social media. And before you know it, we started getting, I'd start getting calls from like news reporters saying, can we do an article about what you're doing down there?
Wow.
So I remember the first one was DNA Info. A gentleman by the name Mark Conkle did it, and that kind of started a whole movement of other reporters saying, well, we want to do this report and talk about it. And then it became a couple of years, and before you know it, the city called me, or one of the curators, and said, we kind of want to do what you're doing down there with that. We want to activate these alleys in the Loop. And you're kind of already doing that in the South Side. So would you be involved and help us out? And I said, sure. So I was able to get some friends to donate a school bus. So he brought a school bus to Pullman. And the same thing, we got kids, everybody in the neighborhood. We got paint, and I said, everybody,
hop on board.
Go at it. And same thing. So a lot of people would get together. They would just go at it, and they had fun. And then I had to tie it in together. And then we brought it to the Loop, and then it was unheard of. The people coming into an alley in the Loop and getting to know each other. And what happens now is in the Loop, it's a bigger scale, because now people will actually hang out in the Loop instead of going home. And now they'll start patronizing some of the restaurants or bars after the 5 p.m. shift or 6 p.m. shift. And it took off. And then the finale one of that year, I did we did a boat, and it was during October. So I had like the 7 Faces of Sin. I also put Rise of the South Side, and I got some backlash from that city. And that's very racist, And I said, well, no, it's not racist. I'm creating this art piece in the South Side, and I've always felt like the South Side has this bad image when it doesn't. There's so many beautiful gems in the South Side, and I feel like it's starting finding to rise. And so that's where I came up with the Rise of the South Side. And then I had the 7 Faces of Sin to portray the Halloween themed. And then on the other side of the boat was my traditional patterns of hieroglyphics. And so that started that movement of alley art parties.
Wow. So really, in a sense, I mean, in some way, I guess you could call it performance art, but it's also participatory. It's also then becomes public space kinds of things where people can enjoy your work, in the public arena as well, too, in the boat and things like that. So, so parallel to this, then you also, more recently, now you're part of the Chamber of Commerce as well. You've really become deeply insinuated into the community.
I did. This year, I've always kind of helped out, and I've always told people about Pullman and Roseland. And I feel like Pullman is now on a great trajectory path. And the neighborhood right next to Pullman is Roseland. And Pullman doesn't technically have a Chamber of Commerce, so it falls under the Roseland Greater Chamber of Commerce. And I've always felt that, okay, well, Pullman's taken off. Why don't we try to help Roseland? And it's the same mentality of, when people are in Pullman or this area, they say, well, you don't cross the track, that's Roseland. Nobody goes to Roseland. I said, I've heard this song and dance before.
There's a lot of lines.
It's like, it'll never change, Ian. It's Roseland. I said, that's what they said about this area, and we're Pullman, and we're the South Side, and look what's going on.
Yeah, gosh. So then, in that same context, to circle back, challenges of getting a house, you get a house. Challenges of getting a building, you got a building. And does this building now have some decent coffee in it? Or tell us about the cafe.
Yeah, so the cafe was a blessing in disguise. The city, neighborhood housing service, it was actually Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives reached out to me and they said, Ian, we have a building for you. And I said, well, I don't want your building. And they said, aren't you trying to open a coffee shop in Pullman? I said, yes, because I live in Pullman. I don't want a random building in the south side of Chicago. I want something where I can walk to and live. I don't want something just randomly somewhere. And they said, no, it's actually on the same block where you tried to buy another building where it did not work out. And I said, okay, I'm listening. So they said, we don't technically own it, but one of our sister or brother organizations do, and they're called Neighborhood Housing Services. So it's NHS.
Uh-huh.
And I said, okay. So they put the building out, and it was very, very, it's almost like they're giving it away. But you had to put a proposal, and they wanted it Chase had it, and they donated it to these organizations. And so, but they didn't want just an investor coming in and flipping it.
Right.
They actually
Sure.
wanted like a true business to come there that would actually add to the neighborhood and something positive. And so I said, well, this would be a perfect place for a coffee shop. And I have no business of knowing how to run a coffee shop, make coffee, or do anything. I think as a teenager I worked at Starbucks, but that was about it. But I knew that's what it needed. And so I reached out to my aunt and my cousin. I said, I have an opportunity, but I can't quit my day job to make coffee because I don't even know if this will work. So we did it, and with the team of my aunt, my cousin, it wouldn't have happened. But
Wow.
we came together. My aunt and cousin made the furniture in the place.
Wow.
I remember I was in the wintertime. I was there by myself because they weren't in Chicago yet. My aunt eventually retired and then moved to New Orleans, and my cousin was in Ohio. And I tried to do a lot of the work myself because it's expensive to rehab, and I was still trying
Sure.
to fix my house. And so just starting to look at things, I started tearing off plaster. I'd see exposed brick, and I said, this would be perfect. And the contractors finally came in and tore the ceiling down. There was exposed wood beams. I said, this is perfect. And people said, you can't have exposed brick. And I said, why not? Well, in the wintertime it gets cold. And I said, well, that's why you have heaters. I mean, it's going to get cold regardless. I don't know if there's brick if you don't have heaters.
I was here in February.
Yeah. So, now we have coffee. We have Café du Monde. The sandwiches are made fresh. The Café du Monde is from New Orleans, so we get that coffee. It has chicory in it.
Yeah.
And little by little, it's really taken on its own life. We've done, Wednesdays we do game night where the community comes in. I have a stack of games where they can sit there, drink a cup of coffee or water, or tea, and get to know the neighbors. And then we've started doing other events where we'll have like a live musician, a book signing. I wanted to do art, but I'm such a messy artist that I would just destroy the place with a bunch of paint everywhere. So I kind of said,
you can bring in your finished
right.
pieces, but no in process.
and then people have said, how come your art's not in here? You figure your art, and I said, well, no, it would be very overwhelming because if you go on the side of the cafe, the whole alley is filled with a lot of my art. The neighborhood has a lot of my art, and I just didn't want it to just be screaming.
Sure.
Look at me, I'm art. And so it has a nice touch to it. It feels like you're home in one of the houses in Pullman, really, with the wood and exposed brick.
Nice. Beautiful. So when did it open?
It opened 2 years ago. Grand opening was in 2015. House tour weekend was our grand opening.
Oh, perfect.
We got handed. That was our soft grand opening, and sure enough, you have 2,000 people coming into Pullman, and at lunchtime for the weekend, there's, you have a few barbecue pop-up stands.
Yeah.
Just a rush.
Wow.
Nonstop. So
That's great. And is it a historical landmark, or is there some designation along those lines in that neighborhood or that building?
Yeah. In 2014. Obama came down and declared that area the first national monument park of Chicago.
Wow.
So it all kind of worked out, and I said, wait a minute. My friends were like, your house, your cafe, and your neighborhood just became a national monument? And I said, yeah, we're a national park now.
Yeah.
We have park rangers now with the Smokey the Bear hats giving tours. And
Wow.
they're like, wow. And so people started saying, I want to go down there. And so more and more people started coming down. And what happened is, when there was 40 or 50 vacant houses, now life is filled into these houses because people started coming down, they started buying. And it's the same mentality that I had. People, coming in from Old Town, Logan Square, Lincoln Park, Lakeview, mostly North Side neighborhoods. And they just got tired of the congestion, and they saw an opportunity. And other people are from the South Side too, and they just love that experience. And a lot of artists are moving in, and now they recently proposed to put a $20 million artist work live loft on my block. So
wow,
that's going to be called the Pullman Arts Lofts or Pullman Art Space.
Wow, and you're really kind of the spark, the seed for all that, man. That's really really wonderful.
I think I'm part of the spark, the many sparks of the. I'm just like one part of the puzzle to the beautiful pieces that make Pullman special. There's so many people that do things that we kind of come together and push it, and it's really
love
not
that.
just me. It's everybody.
Well, I think it speaks to the community too, and the fabric of who was there to begin with, who has stayed, who has come back, and it's not the issue of the traditional kind of thing of where you see opportunistic people coming in, doing the flips, throwing in, X million dollar places that, people that originally lived there could never afford in a million years. And the whole aspect of the community, the communalness of it, having an artist workshop, having a coffee shop, having game night, having public art, those are all the kinds of things that I think speak to people that want to have a community and people that relate to those kinds of things. I think that's really, I tip my hat to you, man.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. So I want to talk a little bit about, now into the little deeper dive about your art. So as we were getting started, just a little backgrounder, Ian showed us an opportunity to see him sort of at work on a video. Right and left-handed with spray cans. I mean, I could see why you wouldn't want to do anything. You got to be a little careful with that. But tell us about the media you use. Tell us, do you have a favorite? Are you kind of just into, whatever, suits your fancy, suits the project? And tell us about your craft.
I would say my favorite, if it came down to, if you brought every medium in front of me and said you had to pick one, it would be the brush and the canvas. That's my favorite. With doing community, it's difficult because a lot of times if you have 50 people or 80 people or 100, a big number of people participating, a canvas will not work. You'll have to have a big space, like a bus, a big garage, multiple pieces of wood planks together. So we'll use a combination of brushes and spray paint. Spray paint is fun because I can cover a large area very quickly. I enjoy chalk, pastels, watercolors, crayons, drawings.
And you do a lot of that as mixed media
I do.
Combining those, right? Yeah.
And I also do a lot of digital media. So I'll take it's like art within art. So what I'll do is I'll take photographs of things, like skyline. So it'll be my art as the photograph. And then I'll take my art and mash it and blend it with that skyline. We're using technology. So now I'm focusing my art to get into consumer art. So I'm using technology because to paint something may take several weeks, and it's very time consuming. And with everything I'm doing, I love painting, but it's more of, it just when I can. With the digital, I can with technology, it helps me speed up the process very quickly, and I'm able to be really engage the audience because I can post new content every day.
Yeah, for listeners, we'll put this in the show notes, but do follow Ian on Facebook and Instagram. I mean, it's just really amazing the kinds of things that you've been involved with. Do you have an influence? Whose art do you dig? Whose art do you think maybe is impact? Because they can be two different things. You can love pointillism, but maybe you don't do that. But I mean, what do you like, and who's your influences?
My influence. I did not go to art school, so I think in a way it's helped me just become myself. Because when I think you're taught certain styles and you practice that, and it helps you. But a lot of times artists may get caught in following those patterns. When the way I approach art, it has to come from whatever's in my mind, so it's always freehand, and whatever I'm feeling or whatever I'm going through just has to come out the way it is. And a lot of times I'm painting, I'm like, oh, I just messed this up, but just keep going, Ian. Like you get in your head sometimes, you're like, oh, this is horrible. But my influence really is people would always say, Ian, you remind me so much of Keith Haring. So then I started.
That's in my notes. Yeah, really, I resonated with that as well too.
And I watched the documentary Jackson Pollock, and after seeing his thing, I love the splatter. So I always tell people, if you got Basquiat, Pollock, Jackson Pollock, a little bit of Picasso. I'm inspired a lot by Picasso, and I already mentioned Basquiat and Haring. It's like four, like those guys. I love their styles and I love their stories, and I always try to incorporate some of their things with me.
Mm-hmm. I'm certainly no art critic or anything, but as you've mentioned that, in some of the pieces I've not seen your entire body of work, but I can see some of those kinds of influences showing. I mean, that and again, kind of the publicness of it as well too. So Do you ever think like of art as a political tool? I mean, it's gotten politicians' attention. You got, the in some level, that's you're living in now a, what is it, a national
Monument.
monument,
Park,
yeah, park. So, where's the juxtaposition of art and politics? Do you have any thoughts or feelings about that?
I think it does attract politics because with doing what I was doing, I was able to get the mayor to come down to Pullman, and he did a live press conference from the cafe. So
Wow.
when the mayor comes down, it's a big deal. 10 news crews comes in and come in the cafe, and
Wow.
and then I took him through the alleys of Pullman, and half the people are really upset because I did that, because no matter who's in that spot as a mayor, you're always going to have half the people that just hate you. No matter what you do, they're going to hate you. And some people kind of, they like him for what he does, but you're always going to be in that space. So I got a lot of pushback from people saying, why would you do that? And other people said, Ian, I don't care what people say. You were the first person that brought the mayor to Pullman ever. So thank you. And I said, I try it. I think it's not a bad thing. And he has a tough job. I give him. He's done a lot for our neighborhood, so that's why I have much respect for him.
Well, I think in his predecessors, too. I mean, Chicago does have a wonderful history of public art, sculptures and Matisse and Picasso, et cetera, and I think you're kind of following in a heritage of that, which is nice. A lot of the art that resonates with me, too, from the political side, this is silly, but I just love Bansky stuff. I mean, I just think they're funny. I think, they're a gentle, poke in political eyes, and I think that or Jenny Holzer or other people like that are very different than the kind of art that you have, because your art is your art. It's not like, making a political statement like the Chinese artist Weiwei or anybody like that. Yours is just the art, and it can have that same kind of resonance with Democrats or Republicans or, whatever, Cubs and Sox, whatever it is, that there's kind of a universality, I think, to the work that you've done and with your art. So, again, I have to tip my hat to you with that. And I think in terms of visibility and in terms of, again, this integration and synthesis of art and community development, tell us about your relationship with Method.
Yes, so they built a factory years ago in Pullman. They're a San Francisco-based organization, and Method is a soap company. They came out with like the first soap product without using harmful chemicals. That's their pretty much their mission statement.
Mm-hmm. A great niche, by the way. I mean, I saw one of the founders at Big Omaha speak, and just the vision. I think this was before they did the work that you're about to describe, and the vision of that, of being, again, this integrative company that cares not only about their product, but about the people that use their product and the people that make their product. So sorry to interrupt, but segue back into those people that you know.
So I didn't really know too much about them. I just knew they were coming into Pullman. And there was a third-party company that was going to host a ribbon-cutting ceremony. And they wanted an artist to be there. And this third-party company already had a list of artists. But the city was going to be involved, like the mayor, the governor, one of the Kennedys were coming down because he's big on environment.
Uh-huh.
And so it was a big deal.
Wow.
And so for some reason they said, no, we don't want those artists. You got to get this other artist. Lives in Pullman. Like they wanted an artist that was in Pullman, not just some artist at this third party company.
You've got like very unique cred there.
So finally I get a message on Facebook Messenger from a gentleman. He's like, "You are very hard to get a hold of. You don't have a website or anything."
There's something kind of cool about that, though. It's like.
And so he messaged me and said, "I'm doing this exclusive party. I can't go into details about it, but do you have time to have a phone call with me this week?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Okay, we're XYZ company. We're working with another main company. I can't give you the name because we have it's a non-disclosure, and basically we're having a black tie event, and there's going to be some very well-known people there, Kennedys, for example, the governor, the mayor, we're going to do this ribbon cutting, and they'd like an artist to be there." And I said, "Okay." that's fine. And he said, are you available this date? We'll pay you this much. And I said, sure. And he's like, and then he said, okay. And then as we started getting closer to the date, he said, okay, I can start giving you details now. So there's this area in Chicago called Pullman. You might not know. And I'm like, I wasn't interrupting him, but he's like, there's this area in Pullman. They're building this factory, and we're going to be doing this party ribbon cutting, but the ribbon was going to be there, but the after party was going to be in Old Town. And that's where they wanted me to paint. So I got to go to the ribbon cutting, and then everybody else we'd go to this after party, and it was nicely catered. And so he was asking me like what I was going to paint, and I said, you know what, why don't I buy a big canvas, and I'm going to spray paint it with black chalkboard paint. And around it, I'll do my art. And what we'll do is what I've been doing in Pullman. Why don't everybody that comes to this party, instead of using paint, they'll have chalk. So that way, if it gets on your suit, it can just brush off. So I didn't want to paint. I told him, I said, I'm not going to go there and just paint by myself. If I'm going to be at this party, I don't care if people are wearing tuxedos.
If he would have known you, he would have known that.
He said, I kind of like that idea. And I said, yeah, that's what we've been doing here for some time. And so he went with it, and wow. Sure enough, we did that, and the founders had a blast, and everybody had a blast, and they were just participating, and everybody was going at it. And at the same time, I created these custom bottles for Eric and Ryan, who's the founder and co-founder of Method, and they loved it. And that's how I started my relationship with Method. And then they had a year where they were going to do it was a volunteer day where San Francisco and the Chicago or Pullman, they all fly into the Pullman, and they get involved with the community. They have like a community day. And they have a bunch of things they do, and one of them, they wanted the workers to get creative. So they asked me if somehow we could do like this paint party, and I said, yes, we can do it. We're going to need tons of paint, and we'll get plywood. So we had a bunch of plywood lined up, and literally 100 employees
wow.
went at the wood, and then I had to tie it in together, and then we started sticking them around Pullman.
Wow.
And so we have it at Argus Brewery, we have it at this community garden, we have it in the alleys, and it was nice because Method employees contributed to this art pieces that got scattered into a neighborhood.
That's great. And one of the things too I learned with Method is that all their commercials, you go to YouTube or whatever, see a commercial, whatever, is all their employees. They're not hired actors or whatever. And it just, again, it speaks to the creativity and multiplicity of people's talents, because all their commercials are just hysterical and really good message and just awesome. So, well, I could talk to you all day. This is just so amazing. I just want to finish up with the last couple of questions. Through your journey, I mean, man, I knew bits and pieces, but it's nice to kind of get the whole, story laid out. It sounds like there's been a lot of surprises in your journey so far, but are there any things that just really have stood out? I mean, it just seems like everything that you've talked about was like one serial surprise after another, but are there any things that are particular, like of all these wonderful accomplishments, is there something you're particularly proud of, or a surprise that particularly, stands out in mind?
That's a good question. I'm just happy to be able to have be part of an outdoor gallery where people can come inside a national park and people can see the architecture, see art, get a history lesson. So it's all in one in a park, and I think that's really what I sometimes just look back and I'm happy because it's easier to draw people to a national park now than it was to say, hey, come down to 112th and Cottage in the south side of Chicago. And would say, you're out of your mind.
Yeah, 112? So, right. Wait a minute.
The biggest thing is I've been able to draw at least one or two people every weekend, sometimes more, and word is traveling. So people from California, I actually have people staying with me in California now. They've been following me on Facebook and said, Ian, we want to go to Chicago, but we want to check out Pullman. And I said, sure. So they're staying with me till Monday.
That's so cool. Wow.
And then another buddy saw me on Monday from California, and people from all over are coming down, and social media has done a lot to create awareness.
That's great. Do you miss anything? I mean, it sounds like it's in a sense almost idyllic. I mean, you've got community, you've got people expressing interest, you've got creative outlets, you've got probably this wonderful entourage of folks that are now friends that, are part of the cafe or part of the art community or part of the neighborhood or whatever. But anything you miss?
Anything I miss? You mean back home in the West Coast, or like anything I miss?
Yeah. Other than February's in LA.
Yeah. One thing I miss, I mean, friends, family in the West Coast. I missed the beaches. I miss surfing, the sunshine.
Not a whole lot of surfing in Chicago.
No, not a whole lot of
Even in the
surfing. That was my thing. I gonna somehow figure out how to surf 3 months and paint out of the year somewhere, and then come back to Chicago. I know Chicago has been one of the best things that ever happened to me. The people of Chicago have embraced me. They've taken me in open arms, and I was truly afraid of Chicago. Like a lot of my friends are when they come here. Their friends and family say, whatever you do, don't go to the South Side because that's where people get killed. And that's the thing. They're always scared, and then they go back. They're like, actually, you have to go to the South Side. It's pretty fun.
Pullman is the place.
Yeah, they're like Pullman. They get to see the art, and then it's different. They get a history lesson, so they have a lot of fun. I'm just very happy with how everything has kind of come together, and it's everything I do works well. I'm also an IT recruiter, so it helps me get new accounts, and the more accounts I get, the more people I place, and it's this rewarding of helping people find jobs. And now I started grabbing people that are in the South Side that maybe don't have the best skills, and I started plugging them to other people to get jobs, or the low entry levels. And I remember I worked in big companies. I said, well, you can't really be recruiting down there because there's not a whole lot of talent. And I said, I'm tired of this story.
Let it go.
Leave me alone. Let me do my thing. And so, and now they're saying, there's companies down there. I said, yes, there's even more companies. There's a lot of companies everywhere in the North, the West, and everywhere around Chicago. And if you can help people out, just help them out. It doesn't matter what kind of area it's in. I think there is that need help is there is we should focus on helping.
That's great. Well, I mean, it's the proof's in the pudding. So it's just, I'm so impressed, Ian. I mean, it's amazing work, and it's amazing, complementarity of your talents and your spirit and who you are as a person. I mean, it's wonderful. So, because you didn't start off with like some plan of strategically, well, here's what I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. You have a conversation with a bartender in a bar, and that leads to this, and that leads to that. And people, it's not like someone out, you've got plenty of hustle, but it's not like someone going out hustling somebody, I mean, I think people see you and gravitate to you by virtue maybe of the entree of your art, but then when they get to learn who you are as a person and how sincere and how real you are is just, that's I think it blows people away. I mean, it's your art is a great entree to you as getting to know you as a person. So I compliment you, man. That's really wonderful.
The one thing that I did notice is with art that I liked is when we started doing the alley art parties, and Chicago is a beautiful city, but I also find it particularly like one of the most segregated cities that I've been to. I mean, in LA, it's just different. And when we would do the alley art parties, we would have Hispanic kids, older white folks, and everything in between, right? Black, every religion. And what happened is the kids that maybe thought these people were racist, they would end up talking to them, and they would say, that old man's not racist, he's just my neighbor. Mm-hmm. And then they would say, these gang-banging thugs, they're actually not gang-banging thugs, they're my neighbors. And what happens is when you can get everybody together in a non-hostile or non-competing, where you just can let yourself flow and be yourself, conversations start happening. And I think that's what we're missing sometimes. We're so caught up with the right-wing party, the left-wing party, and what's going on today. And I think sometimes we just need to just let the noise go away, and we need to learn how to we should learn how to agree to disagree sometimes without name calling and saying mean things to each other.
Yeah, hear. Yeah, I think what you've done, and I think your art draw people in so that they find a common voice. And then it does exactly what you said. Then people get to have conversations, because there oftentimes are not venues in which those diverse people would have the opportunity to get to know one another. We all go to our own churches or our own thises or our own that's, and don't have a public space where you can have those conversations. And, oh, I really like that. Well, I really like that too. You know, oh, have you met Ian? He's this really interesting guy. He did this and this. And no, I didn't know. You know, and it just, having those kinds of conversations, you create a space and a stimulus and opportunity to be able to do that. So I think that's beautiful. So I'm going to wrap up. We don't spend all afternoon. How can people find you on social media? How can people see your work? I got to know, do you have a website yet?
I do not have a website
right.
yet.
Keep it underground, man.
I think, honestly, I think this next year I've been thinking about getting a website. I have a few people that are interested in helping me. To find me, Ian Lantz on Facebook. There's also Ian Lantz Art on Facebook, and then my Instagram is Ian Lantz Art, one word. If you ever want to get a hold of me, just message me, and I'll get back to you within 24 hours, and that's how most people have been getting a hold of me. And if you ever want to email me, it's ianlantzart@gmail.com.
And if people would like to go by and have a cup of coffee at Pullman Cafe, what's the address?
Yes, it's 11208 South St. Lawrence Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. It's in the heart of the Pullman National Park. In the winter, we close for about 3 months just because it doesn't make business sense to be open. We're not you really have to go to Pullman to go to the cafe. You really have to go to Pullman, and it's like in the heart of it, so it's not like on a busy street. And
Gotcha. Good. Well, I hope people will come by and have an opportunity to see your work firsthand and experience it that way. And in the meantime, digitally on Facebook and Instagram. And like I said earlier, I'm a big follower as well too. And your stuff, I've seen it primarily on little small screens. I'm dying to see it, big and in real life. So thank you so much, Ian, for being a guest today. It's been great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks, Chris.
Living a Life in Full is a production of Stout Media, a subsidiary of Gordian Knot, LLC. Assistant producer, Gracie Wong. Music, Dan O'Brien. Post-production, Sam Rude. Graphics, Larry Newberry. Executive producer and host, Dr. Chris Stout. To learn more, stop by our website, alifeinfull.org, for show notes. And please recommend us to your friends and leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks.